project, whether that's to, help with the ideas or to do a crazy logo that might not get through. That side of wild thinking can come from slightly older generation within a workplace as well.
Priyjah, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to delve into the topic of age in the industry with you. And you've had such an impressive career today, obviously, so we'll touch on some of the points there. So you started with internships and working at some incredible renowned agencies, and you became design director at Ragged Edge by the time you were 30. You have so many incredible projects to your name and accolades and all those wonderful things. And you've got 2 D&AD pencils to your name as well. And I know that you're a D&AD judge this year. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Really exciting.
Very exciting.
And last year you moved to How&How and you were really quickly promoted to Associate Creative Director. So congratulations again. I feel like I'm going to say that a lot. I'd love to know more about your role at How&How and what you enjoy most about it as well.
So it's been a really amazing transition just from design director to Associate Creative Director, and also just, I don't know, like new place, new challenge, new environment. It's definitely been a really great way for me to grow really quickly as well. At How&How, I feel like there's lots of autonomy within the role, which means that I get to be, I don't know, my most creative self, but also put like my own spin on things. And it feels like there's just a really, really lovely amount of trust as well. Like we're all trying to build the best work together. So it's a really, really exciting time. I feel like I'm being pushed creatively, trying to push the work. I'm working with, the most amazing team. So I feel really lucky, really blessed to like get that role really quickly. But I think when you're excited and feeling challenged and wanting to push the work, it's amazing what a new environment can kind of do for you.
Absolutely. I love that you've obviously got a lot of energy for this next move for yourself, and I think it's really easy to look at someone's career as a snapshot and think, God, they made that look so easy or seamless, or it's so natural to kind of move up. But you obviously put a lot of work into obviously your career, and it's a fantastically exciting time for you. So we're here to talk about age and generational diversity in teams. So how do you think having that aspect of diversity impacts creative output?
I think the thing about teams is that everyone brings their own individual thinking and creativity to a project. I think we always love to have more than one designer on things. We always like to work with strategists, with writers. And I think it's always that amalgamation of like so many different brains coming together that creates the best creative output. And ideas can just literally come from anywhere, whether you're like the youngest member within the team or, maybe it's from client services. Like it's not restrictive to just creativity. And I think it's exactly the same with age. I feel like when we're building teams in a way where we're encouraging that kind of style of thinking, it's important to have diversity within age as well. I feel like someone who is like a junior member of staff versus someone who's got like 12 years experience, if not more, they're going to have different kind of experiences within life, which I think is going to create more of a creative environment when everything is like put back together. And I think, just the diversity in age, I think is just like super important for that as well. And I think it's probably the most forgotten aspect within building teams. And I think when we're building teams at How&How, we're always looking for individual strengths. And I think that can be something to do with age as well. Like, why are we trying to build teams where everyone needs to be exactly the same, which is why I think, a broader age spectrum feels really important for creative output as well.
Totally. And you've got an incredible team to manage as well. Globally, you work across all of these different disciplines in your agency. How can you best create a culture that allows everyone's input to be valuable and listened to when you have so many spinning plates?
Yeah, it's such a funny job, but it's not funny. It's like, it's tricky. And I think you have to be like mega organized and on top of everything. And I suppose like maybe it comes back to my other point about individual strengths and recognizing that and not thinking that everyone needs to be the same or be the youngest or the oldest. I think like everyone's going to bring their own thing to the table. So I think recognizing individuality and how that can strengthen a team feels really super important. But also I think in our changing world, I suppose one thing to think about is like flexibility. Everyone's going to have different working styles, working patterns throughout their whole career. I know that, when I was a junior, we used to work all hours and party all hours as well. Whereas now I'm probably in the middle where I'm like still working very hard, obviously, but work-life balance has come more into play. And then I think for the designers I know and directors who are parents, that really, really changes how you work and what your priorities are. So I suppose like making sure we're fostering an environment which, feels like it is inclusive of how people change over time with their lifestyle and lives outside of work as well, and making sure we can create an environment that feels like people can still continue with their career and have like their personal life. And
it brings me to a question I have about the pressure we put on ourselves, actually, because the industry has obviously changed a lot from working those long hours. That's more frowned upon now. We're given more flexibility. People are more forward thinking in terms of ways of working. And yet there's still a shared, I feel, anxiety and pressure. Do you think that creatives put too much pressure on themselves at every point in their career, or is it a starter thing?
Yeah, I think for me in particular, I know I've always put so much pressure on myself, but I think I've learned to, throughout my whole career, whether I've been a junior, midway, associate creative director, there's always been pressure in different forms. And I think the bad kind of pressure is where, that element of comparison comes in. You're trying to like climb the ladder, you're trying to get the next role, and you're always looking to the people who are beside you. And age is like really interesting when it comes to roles as well, because people expect, at this age, I want to be here. At this age, I want to be here. And I think that expectation and putting age to a role or like numbers of years of experience feels kind of wrong, because I think that's where like the pressure comes into it. I think the moment when I was younger, when I said to myself, I just don't compare yourself to anyone else. Just find your own rhythm, find your own way of working and enjoy the work. That's the moment where I felt like I was flourishing and everything felt like it was coming naturally, where it felt like opportunities were coming to me naturally, because I just let go of thinking, oh my God, my friend from uni is like, she's a design director at whatever age and things like that. And I think, everyone's journey is totally different. Every agency is totally different. Every role everywhere is totally different. Like being a associate creative director at How&How is going to be completely different to someone else doing it. And partly is due to, what the studio expectations are for that role, but also like how you want to do that as well. Yeah. So I think the moment I realized that, it took a bit of the pressure off. But yeah, I suppose it's about like how you handle that as well. When I was younger, it's really hard just going from uni to design and, working in that intense environment and being at an age where it was just the norm to work long hours. Totally. And that's the way, I think that's the other thing, I suppose, like people associated long hours and bums on seats with a good work ethic rather than, being able to do the best work in the right amount of time and not burn yourself out. And I think that's probably been the massive switch actually between like when I was a junior versus now, and how being in the right leadership that fosters that kind of environment is probably important to how you see and that kind of stuff really.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got such a healthy attitude towards that. But I suppose our age can influence you both ways, because I remember feeling a great sense of pride personally when I was the youngest person. I think in the agency at some points, taking on big responsibilities. So it can both boost your confidence, but also make this really unhealthy comparison thing happen. Do you feel that there's a peak age for working in design right now?
It's like, I don't want there to be, but I feel like you notice like throughout my career, like, what ages certain people have had roles for, or like see similar patterns. And it does feel like maybe at my role, there's probably a lot of like 35 to like 40-year-olds, and then maybe 50, anything like 50 plus, from what I've seen, has probably been you're either like a director at ECD or you found a company. That's probably what I've noticed from my career. So yeah, 35 to like 40-ish, and then obviously the youngers coming up, you'll always like see plenty of them. So between 21, when do you leave uni now? 21 to 40 feels like roughly like what you see in an agency, or what I have seen so far, unless you're like a founder or a director.
Yeah, it's completely rings true with the research that I've been doing as part of our Design Next report, but it's still shocking to put an age cap on it, especially when we're obviously generationally we're working longer and longer. We will probably be working into our 70s now. And so to know that we'll have potentially peaked a couple of decades before that is very
it's really scary. I know. I just I think about the patterns, and I think your research piece is amazing because it's really made me reflect on how big of a problem this is, especially someone who is like probably in the top end of like that bracket. I think to myself, oh my God, do I have to think about like what my next few career steps are? Like, is it like, is my career just CD founder, that's it? Or can we try and change things where it feels like we're being, I don't know, making opportunities and feeling like we can create more of an inclusive environment?
So I suppose people that have loads of experience and loads of skin in the game are seen as masters or fantastic craftspeople at what they do. And in our early research, actually, we found that people see young people as having creativity as their core strength and older people as having confidence as their core strength. Do you think there's a kind of bias there that young people have this, we use terms young, fresh, creative, naivety, playfulness. These are all wonderful things in design. Do you think that we lose them as we get older?
That's definitely true, because when I'm looking through folios and things like that from younger designers, that is what I'm after. Like, I'm always looking for the most playful, like crazy ideas, because it feels like a great way to like bring a new fresh wave of energy into a studio. Whereas probably when we're looking at more senior portfolios, we're looking for, it needs to be slick, it needs to be like, there needs to be an element of confidence that comes through that folio. But yeah, it's weird. I don't know if I'm answering the question, to be honest, but it definitely is the case when we're looking at folios that it feels like that type of way. But it's not to say that design directors or at that kind of top level of thinkers don't have that fresh energy, but it does feel like the young comers like have that like automatically. That might be because there's like, they're hungry, they're trying to prove themselves, they're trying to like climb the ladder, all that kind of stuff, really. So that might be the energy coming from them.
We can come back to some of the topics you touched upon when you spoke at our Common Interest event, and you spoke about the importance of having playfulness in your work, and you spoke very passionately about the fact that you do your own creative personal work just for your own playfulness, and to keep that fresh creativity alive in your own practice. But I suppose when people get older and have more responsibilities, it's really hard to find that time to do that.
I think also like freelance, when you're young, you take on lots of, sometimes you take on some freelance stuff to just do some creative bits on the side. And then, as you were saying, like as soon as you get more and more responsibility, you find it harder to either find the time to do that kind of stuff or have the energy. Like after you do like 9 to 5, like my brain is just like, I don't want to do any more graphic design. I want to watch, some crap TV and just tune out. So it's also I suppose like it doesn't feel like a feasible way or like to, foster creativity outside of work. But I feel like for me, sometimes it's just been like making something really random, like even if it was like half an hour, and it doesn't have to be a full freelance project. It would just be trying something crazy on the side, or like even just as a director being a little bit hands-on sometimes. I feel like that is actually great, and that's not to take away from, the team. It's to like, help the team and, move the work forward, but also like it's good for you to I've always found it's good for me to get stuck in sometimes, whether that's to, help with the ideas or to like, do a crazy logo that might not get through, or to, that kind of side of like wild thinking can come from like the slightly older generation within a workplace as well. The unexpected stuff. I think it's because we can, whether you're young or old, there can be times where you feel like you have to play it safe for clients. But I think the younger generation coming through with wilder stuff, because they're just like, why can't we? We can also do that same thing. And I think there's a cross-generational thing where we can all do wild, crazy ideas. It doesn't just need to come from one generation or another. I suppose it coming from the top end might mean that there's a better way to sell that thinking in. So I suppose the younger generation could have a wild idea, the older generation have the knowledge and the tools to sell that idea. So there's like aspects of both working together that I think is really important. It comes back to your thought around age, diversity, like taking the individual strengths of people and putting them together is where like, we're going to create the best creative output.
Totally. I love that. And I love the aspect of being a bit wild. I think that's a principle you can take with you. Being a bit out there, being brave are all wonderful principles of having a creative team. And in the role that you're in now, obviously in a leadership role, you need to be inspired and inspiring to your team. How do you go around being inspired, staying current, trying to stay ahead of trends and knowing and having an opinion on what's going to happen next?
There's probably like a couple of different things. I think one thing is like not being stuck in your ways or being scared to change. I think like a really like minor example of that is like probably the technology that we've been working with. I suppose like my generation has come from the end of, this is going to sound quite technical now, the end of Quark to InDesign to Figma to, now AI. And I think throughout my whole career, it's been about like embracing the new things that have come in. And I've noticed as I've got older, I've got a bit more stubborn. It took me a little while to go from InDesign to Figma. I hate to say that, but it is really about, just embracing the new things that are current. And sometimes that can come from younger members of staff and talent who are like, should we try using this? Should we try do this? Like, have you seen this new program? Have you seen this new, like, I don't know, stock image site? Like for some reason, like all our algorithms are totally different, right? But I think it's being open to, the new things that are coming up, trying things and not being afraid of change and not seeing that as, a bad thing that we're getting new ways of working, but seeing that as an exciting tool to just like create even better work. So I think there's definitely an element of like not being scared of change and embracing that and utilizing that to be an even better creative. You've got the foundations of, what you've learned throughout your career span as maybe someone slightly older in the industry, and then utilizing the new stuff on top of that, I think is like a great combination. So I think there's definitely something to do with that. But I think also like, I don't know if this is controversial, but like knowing when to move on. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this. I've been at like a couple of different agencies now. And I think for me, when I stopped learning, when I stopped having fun, when I stopped feeling challenged, that was my time to leave that agency. And I think there's a really big thing for me about like working in the right environment. And I think that can also help you, learn the newest ways of working, being current, not sticking to trends, and just like how much a new environment can give you in terms of like that aspect. But I think, knowing when to move on is also a good way to stay current. And I think for me, nothing needs to be forever. And I think new things can help you stay challenged and stay current in different ways. And also just working with new people, working with a variety of new people, I think is, a really, really good thing to do. Like, change is good.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I read an article the other day that just said changing the, oh God, I'm going to absolutely butcher this science now, but changing the links you already have in your brain just by doing things slightly different during a day, like taking a different walk to work, is good for you and allows you to kind of build more knowledge and give yourself more brain power, essentially. So if something as little as that can make a difference, pushing yourself to move to a new team or do things differently is going to be massive in terms of your personal development. And personal development is one of the things that apparently people in our generation, millennials, really value around work. We apparently value personal growth, diversity, and purpose-driven work, which rings true with the conversation we're having. What other strengths does our generation bring to the creative industry, do you feel?
This is, I don't know if this is going to sound strange, but the power of like old school classic graphic design.
Yes, love that.
I think just pen to paper, like thinking and getting in a room and just chatting with people and not going straight to your laptop or just like the basics of graphic, like classic typography, things like that. I think stuff like that can be forgotten in the way that technology is moving really fast, but that is like a real skill. I think like I'm even to things like mood boards. Mood boards are, for me, like one of the most like powerful tools. And I think when one of my old CDs taught me how to do it, it's been one of the most useful things for me as a designer and as a leader. And I think the things that feel almost like basic and we don't, maybe people don't do as much, I think are really, really powerful tools. I don't know if it's just from my generation, but it's felt like that's been a really great way to think of like great ideas, position feelings, sell things in. Like I've always found the basic stuff like really helpful, like mood boarding. And then I suppose like there's some other things about our generation, thinking about like how we grew up and thinking about like YouTube and I don't know, DIY makers and creators and like this kind of do it yourself, like learn it yourself attitude and Googling, oh, like how can I do this? How can I do that? Like learning software and things. So maybe there's a little bit of that like DIY learners attitude. And then I think there's also a thing around being stuck in between like two generations and how maybe from my career, like my early days and the generation above me was the work very, very, very hard and long hours and that was the total norm. And then coming in and being in the middle where Gen Z are now like really great at like, having boundaries. And I think we're kind of in the middle. And I think there is something to say about like the energy of hard work, but it's utilizing that in the right way and not feeling like you need to, do long hours or bums on seats to produce the best work. But I think there is a push from that hard work, like ethos that I think is like great. And then that plus the boundaries, it feels like we're stuck in the middle trying to work out like what is the best way of working. But for me, like it's trying to do the greatest work but have that work-life balance as well. I feel like that's been a really, really key part. And I feel like it's probably what it feels like for me, what I've learned from being in between those two generations. Like, how can I really push myself creatively and work hard and like try and achieve the most in my career? But how can I do that without, with a bit of work-life balance and making sure like my boundaries are still set in place? Because I think the best creativity comes when you feel like you have those boundaries and when you feel relaxed and when you're not burnt out, and I'm always producing the best work. So I think the work-life balance thing is also like, I don't know if any of that made sense.
It does. Yeah. It really speaks to me. Absolutely. Because we do have this kind of self-starting attitude. We've got a lot of energy for work, but perhaps sometimes that can like err on the side of unhealthy a little bit,
Yes.
especially in the creative industry, put a lot of pressure from all sorts of angles. So yeah, that really speaks to me. So is there some advice that you would give to emerging creatives around work-life balance or approach to creativity that would help kickstart a creative career a little bit?
Yeah. So I think like my advice to younger creatives would definitely be, funnily enough, things that I have heard from the older
Okay.
generation that have been passed down to me. And I think that's the best pieces of advice you can give people, the ones that have like resonated with you and helped you along your career. And I think one of them is like less to do with the work-life balance thing, but be nice to people. And it's everyone knows everyone, and a good attitude can take you a really long way. Like being really hungry but doing it in the most positive way possible can really influence like how you create, but also how people see you within the agency as well. And like having that energy to just want to do more and be the best possible like creative. So I definitely say, as weird as it sounds, be nice. I think someone once said to me, like, don't forget to have fun. And that has always stuck with me. I think Mr. Bingo's actually got that written on a gravestone. It's amazing, because I think we were talking about pressure. We can put ourselves under so much pressure throughout the whole of our career to be a certain type of designer, to win a certain type of award, or to like, try and make the next leap in your career ladder. But I feel like there's something to be said about having fun along the way. Like, we're so lucky to do what we do, and it's easy to forget that within the pressure of everything, especially as a young designer coming up. Like, try and find the fun and the opportunity and everything. And it's been a good way for me to like step back and work out how I can, make sure this is an enjoyable process for me and my team, but also just to take the pressure off as well, because sometimes it can feel like, I don't know, time-wise, or just everything can feel, let's be honest, anxiety-inducing and things like that. So I think just knowing that, you can take the pressure off, and you work out how to have fun along the way. And you're not going to have the like dreamiest jobs like every time. Like, there's always going to be jobs that don't feel as fun, but how can you make sure the process feels fun, or make sure you're creating an environment that feels like healthy. And someone also said to me, nobody's going to die. And that has been one of the most helpful things, because as a young designer, probably still now, to be honest, like I was filled with anxiety, and I found, the pressure of work can always be a lot for everyone. And I think when someone said that to me, I just felt like something like lifted. And that's not to say like you're not going to produce the best work. It just takes the pressure off slightly. It's such a like small phrase, but maybe it just gave me like a little bit of perspective. And I think that, plus the like don't forget to have fun aspect, have always been two really good pieces of advice that have helped me maintain a bit of peace throughout my whole career, and just try and have fun with it, and not to put too much pressure on yourself, really.
Yeah, that's so important. And the last agency I worked at, one of the strategy directors was so wonderful to work with, and his partner is a brain surgeon. Talk about like a dark look in the mirror. It's not the end of the world. We've all had those moments where it feels like the end of the world, working on a pitch until midnight, or trying to get something out of the door last thing on a Friday, or missing key moments that you want in your life for work. And it's really important to remind yourself that it's not life or death, but it can feel like your whole world. And it's such a vocation to work in design. You're very emotionally in tune with what you give a lot of yourself, which brings me to How&How's Get Even mentorship program for women in creative fields. And you recently hosted a session about imposter syndrome, which is obviously a moment where your emotions get wrapped up in work, and it's it can mean a lot to people and be a really difficult thing to get through. Have you got any practical advice for people who are having that imposter syndrome feeling?
So funny. So we had 4 sessions amongst myself and some of the other women in leadership, we got to take one each to run, and we got to pick. And when I saw imposter syndrome, I was like, that is the one for me, because everyone suffers from it. I know I do, and I feel like it'd just be selfishly, I was like, I want to know more as well. So I literally put my hands up straight away for that one, because it's been such a big thing throughout my career, even now. And I think from that session, we were speaking to the ladies from Concrete Wall Club, and they were amazing. Like, if you've got time, this is not a plug, but like, go back and listen to the session, because they gave some of the best advice. But a couple of things that they mentioned were writing down positive feedback that you've received. And I thought that was such a great, easy way to remind yourself that you can do this job, you can do it really well. Look at all these examples of like how you've done it in the past, because it's so easy for you, I find, for me to just like slip back into, oh crap, like how do I do this, or oh my god, can I do this, or like anything like that, really. And I think that reaffirming what people have said to you, reaffirming the great work that you've done, is really, really important, because it just reminds yourself that you've been there, done that, like you can do this again. And just that kind of form of like appreciation almost, and having a document of it, or just like writing it down. I think amazing piece of advice from those ladies. And I think the other thing is probably there's like loads of practical things like power poses, and especially for women, there's a couple of things like that are practical things that we can do to help us in rooms to feel like more confident and things like that, really. But the gratitude writing things down thing is like tiny, but it's just, you can think about like how many times people have said to you like, oh my god, that was amazing, like you presented so well, or like, I love this piece of work, this is the best logo I've seen. Like, and it can be from anyone as well. Like maybe it's like your peer, or maybe it's like your creative director, maybe it's a client. Like having a list of these things, I think, is a really good way to like reflect on when things have gone really well, so that when things have gone really bad, you can take a step back and be like, hang on, I've got this.
It's so important. I actually do have a folder of screen grabs going back like literally 10 years now, of just when a client sent a quick thing on an email, something like that. There's not a lot in there, but it does remind me of those moments, and it does help me. But it's a good reminder to people to give that feedback. Give that feedback in writing as well. So people really take it in, because in the moment, you did a good job or whatever, it doesn't always hit home. So I think it's a really great reminder of us all to give that positive feedback, because it means a lot to people.
I know, and I think you definitely forget the flip side of that. Like, it's great to receive it, but we got to make sure we're also like giving that out to people. And sometimes when we're so busy, we can fall into the trap of like, completing one presentation onto the next without taking a step back to be like, that was a really great presentation, telling your team that, telling the designers that, and just reaffirming that people have done a really great job in that kind of work.
I wanted to ask you something about when you spoke at Common Interest, you shared a lot of really personal stories, which was wonderful, and we had so much great feedback on it. I think I sent you just a snippet, but you spoke about how your heritage really informs your creative practice. Has the way that you embrace your cultural heritage changed over the years as you've matured, or in your role as you've moved up?
This is such an interesting question, and reflecting on this question has been just like really interesting for me, because I was thinking about early on how I felt as an ethnic minority within a design agency, and like I feel like back then I didn't talk about my heritage as much, and I think there was an element of it feeling like you were an outsider. And I think back then, like, it definitely felt like I couldn't be my true self in some sense. I was definitely holding back on some stuff, or like just talking about my background in general. And I think that was one to do with my confidence and my heritage telling me that as a minority kid of an immigrant, come in, do your job, keep your head down, So like that kind of attitude that probably came from my upbringing, and then across the years working out like I can be my true self. And that, partly that's, me growing in confidence and being able to like be really outspoken about my background and my heritage, but also like outspoken about, biases and privilege and things like that. But it's also like the changing world and how people have become, more open and understanding about those kind of topics as well. So it's easier now to talk about that stuff, and it's easier to kind of like, maybe when a comment doesn't feel quite right or feels wrong, it feels like I can now confidently say, oh, hang on a minute, I don't think, you should be framing things in that way or saying those kind of things. Whereas in the past, I just shut off. I would not like come back on any comments. Like there's definitely been some weird stuff that's been said over the year, but as a junior, you would never feel confident enough to say, hang on a minute, you can't say that. Whereas now I feel very confident that I could just be a bit more outspoken about that, but also like not be ashamed to eat curry at lunchtime. Like, and it sounds like a small thing, but like, it's definitely been me feeling like more confident to be my like true self.
Amazing. I love to hear of that journey. And actually that's only been in your like not even 15 years, I suppose, in your career. So to hear how your personal confidence has evolved in that time and how you have, I know you've inspired others because I saw it at our event, to know the difference that you've made, in your personal confidence during that time. Imagine where we're going to be as an industry and, and that sort of thing in another 15 years. It's a real superpower to own, obviously, your own story and to use that in your creativity like you do is just incredible.
And I think it took me a long time to realize that aspect of my life has really influenced my career in the best ways possible, and not to shy away from the things that my culture has taught me as well. And I know I'm definitely more of a like commercial designer, but I think it's so many aspects of my culture which have really helped me throughout my whole career journey, and it just feels like now I can actually say it. And hopefully that's not because I feel more confident because I'm at a certain role or anything like that, but I definitely think it's the changing world that feels like more open, a changing landscape where the kind of agencies that I've worked at, I've seen the change and noticed how, we are obviously trying to be more inclusive and making sure our teams are diverse in that kind of way as well. So it's that also brings that confidence when you're surrounded by other people who are quite similar to you as well. So it makes me feel like really happy reflecting on that. Again, like there's probably so much more, as always, that we can do. But hopefully for the next generations coming up, they also feel confident to be their like true, authentic self as well.
Absolutely. A final question. Have you ever felt too old or too young for the role that you've been in?
I've had a lot of that feeling across probably my whole career. It's one of those questions that comes about again because of, I suppose, comparison. I don't know if I felt too young for a role, but sometimes I felt maybe too old for a role. And that's not because it was the case, but more because of probably my pressure from like comparison and looking at my peers and where they were and thinking, oh my God, should I still be in this bracket? Should I still be, doing this kind of role? Should I be pushing for the next one? And like, that's definitely a really bad, like I learned over time that I can't think like that. Like my journey is totally different to someone else's journey. And I think when I realized that aspect of it, it was a much healthier way of like being a creative. And I feel like things came, we spoke about this earlier, like things came more natural to me when I understood that I don't need to be comparing myself to anyone else's journey. And I think like, I don't know if I've ever felt too young for a role, but I have felt too young in certain situations. So being in certain like rooms or meetings and things like that, I've always felt that, or not always felt, there was a point in my career where I probably felt like I can't say anything, but even like, because because there's lots of like, more senior people in the room, or not having the confidence to say stuff. So in that, there's been plenty of aspects where I've probably felt too young. Even now, sometimes when you're with like clients and directors and founders, you might feel like a tiny little bit of insecurity, like, oh, am I too young to say something? But it's not. And I think it's like removing that aspect of thinking and just realizing that you're in a position for a reason. And owning that level of confidence, I think, is like really important.
Amazing. I love that. And obviously your own lived experience you've taken through to the way that you lead your team in terms of creating a culture where everyone feels listened to, and you encourage people to speak up in that scenario that you've just mentioned, so you can really inspire the next wave of creatives. So It's wonderful that you embrace that. You have encouraged me to be more wild, and I really appreciate you sharing your personal experiences so far in the industry. There's so much more to come. Thank you, as ever, for your honesty and your insight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. It's been so nice to just like reflect on, and obviously I've only been working for 12, 13 years or whatnot, but it's been really nice to just reflect on that and think about how my age has been a factor, and like, what we can do better for people and how we can be more inclusive as well. It's definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of our team and how we keep growing in the right way.
Super insightful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.